Hi, this is Joe Bolen, and welcome to learning about visualbasic.net. In this episode, we're going to look at the splash screen form, and also we're going to look at the progress bar and the timer. Now, a lot of times the students love to create what I call an artificial splash screen. It's really not the way to tie things in for a program, but it gives a sense of branding to new students when they're creating a program. See that progress bar move forward as they run the program. Well, we're going to learn how to do it, and then I'm going to also give you a reference to where to find more information about the splash screen in terms of how to do that, so that you can do it both the fun way and then also the correct way for a professional release program. So let's take a look at our documentation area first, and you can record that information down and then come back to it after the video. So our documentation is sitting over at these three sites. First of all, we're looking at the Imager site for the screen capture of the splash screen form. And then the code itself is that paste bin where you can see the simple code. Now, I have left out the main form code because there really isn't anything in the main form that I'll be using. It's just a simple display of a form with just one control on it. And then, of course, other videos are available at Bolen Presents at YouTube. So go out and take a look at other ones and get your hands dirty in the code. So if you have stopped and written this down, let's move on forward and begin learning about how to make a splash screen. And I won't call it an artificial type splash screen because it's not perhaps the best way. Okay, I'm going to take you right into Visual Studio, and I've already created two forms. The first form I created, we'll come back to in a minute, which was the main form. And the second one I created, I renamed the splash screen form. Now, all I did when you get form 1 or form 2 is you right click on it and you have the option then to rename it, which I did. Now let's take a look at this form. What I did was I came over to the toolbox and I dragged two labels onto my form, and then I also dragged the progress bar onto the form. Now the splash screen label up here on the form is a little different in settings. Let's take a look at it. I did give it a name on that, which I like to do for all controls so they're descriptive. So I named it my form label, very simple. And then I changed one setting. Auto size is false on this one. We're going to use the sizing handles on that, which is where you see on the screen right now, the sizing handles. And then I came down to the actual font area and set the font to Seago UI 36 point. Let me just show you that you click on the little ellipsis button, and there you'll see that Seago UI, which is Microsoft's recommended font for Windows Forms. I have overridden this, though, to be bold at 36 points. 36 points is half an inch high. There's 72 points to an inch. Okay, so I've got that set. And then also because I'm basically hard coding this, I came down and gave it a text on that splash screen form. And then I set the alignment to be middle center. So I just clicked on that. You'll see the drop down. You'll have middle center for that setting. I did the same thing for this one down here. The difference is the size of the points. This is the status label. And on the status label, the only thing I did differently from the other label was the name and also the size. In this case, I made the size of this one at 18 point bold for that. And I think it was also Seago UI, or at least inherited Seago. So let me type in Seago, and I think you'll see Seago UI. There we go. Okay, so we got Seago UI for that one. And now let's take a look at the progress bar. All I did was I dragged it off, from the toolbox over here under Common Controls, you'll see the progress bar. I just dragged it onto the form and released it. What I did then was size it so it made it nice and big. I stretched it out and had everything set. Then I got all the different labels here and the progress bar centered on the screen. So we basically have 3 controls, 2 labels, and 1 progress bar. So with that being done, what I did next was I double-clicked on the form itself. So I went to the form and double-clicked. And for the form itself, then I started doing the coding. We brought in initially on that double-click this particular area called the load event. The load event fires off when you first start up a form. Things that we do in the load event are housekeeping and initialization of some things, as well as getting ready to prepare for displaying the form. Now, for this particular application, I created 3 different things that are part of the whole class of the splash screen form. The first one was a my timer, and so I declared private with events my timer as new timer. Now I could have dragged from the component tray, and I'll show you that. I'm going to come back to the designer area, to the toolbox. There is also in the area here components that we can use, and one of the components is the timer, and I could drag that onto my form and it would go to the components tray. But this time I decided to do it in code so you get an idea how things are done in code a lot of times. So I did this in code. So I declared my timer as a new timer. The new keyword instantiates the timer on that, so it gets it all set, ready to go. And the with events part allows me then to have the tick event, we'll see in a minute, that fires off when things occur in the timer itself. Then I created a variable called progress bar increment. I wanted to be able to increment my progress bar by a certain amount each time my timer would fire off. And I decided that for this artificial splash screen, I was going to display the splash screen for 5 seconds, and I declared that as a constant. It's not going to change in the program, nor do I want to be able to change it in the program. So by declaring it as a constant, this is set and it'll stay in the program and not change. Also, notice the way we name a constant is a little bit different. We use the screaming uppercase, all caps, with underlines between the words to indicate this is a constant and does not change. Okay, let's come back to that load event. Okay, what I did is I decided to change the progress bar from 100 for its maximum to 1,000. That gave me a little room to do some calculations that I need to do. So I basically multiplied it by 10 to give me 1,000 in the maximized size. And I decided to go with the style of the progress style of continuous. Now, this all could have been set in the design area, but I wanted to do it in code so you could see how it's done in code as well. Now, what I did in terms of thinking this through was I decided to, every 5% of the amount of time that I'm going to give to the screen to be displayed, I'm going to increment the progress bar. So I had to do a little bit of calculations, and here's where a little bit of math came into play. So what I did was I said, okay, I've got my maximum size of 1,000 in this case for the progress bar, and I wanted to increment in little amounts. So I took the splash screen display time, which in this case is 5 seconds, divided it by 20. That gives me a real small number. But then I'm going to also multiply it by a 0.01, and this gives me my percentage of 5%. So this calculation basically is a math way of getting a 5% value. Now, because I'm doing normal floating point division here, I need to convert it to an integer. And to do that, I use the convert to int32 here to convert that to an integer. You could also use the special Visual Basic reserve word called cint instead of convert to int32. I'm trying to instill in my students that I teach that we need to start moving toward a .NET framework type of doing things. This code then would be easy to convert to other languages, especially to the C# language, where we don't have some of the things we have in Visual Basic. Now the label just has loading while we're starting up. And then the timer, which I declared up here and instantiated, I set one of the properties, which is the interval, to the amount of the splash screen wait time, which is 5 seconds. The intervals is multiplied by 1,000 because it deals in milliseconds for the interval. So 5 times the milliseconds, that gives me the amount of time it's going to be there. And then I want to do what's called integer division. Instead of the /, I'm using the backslash and dividing by 20, and that whole number that it returns will be my interval for the timer's tick event. Then I start the timer. So that all takes place in our load event. Now, what I did at this point was I brought my cursor down past the subroutine, and I came up to the top here, and you'll see that the timer appears in the middle section here. And I chose that. Then I came over to the events of that timer, and you see the tick event is there. And I'm going to click on it, and it'll take me to that spot in the code that I have. And that'll create also for you, for the first time, the actual procedure area for you to code in. Now, the tick event fires for every time you've reached that interval that you set. And so what I did was I said, okay, let's start out with a loading progress of 0. We want to go from 0 to 100%, or in this case, to we're going to go to a 1,000. And then I want to take that 0 and I want to increment it by the amount that we determined up above, so that I can dynamically change that value and increase it. Now, by declaring it as static, I'm declaring a variable that will hold its value as we come into this routine over and over again. So load progress will be set there. Instead of defining this up at the top in terms of the whole class, by using static down below, we're defining it only where we need to use it. And this is what we want to do. We want to keep the scope of our coding small. So I've defined it as static. I'm incrementing it. Now the danger is I could actually exceed the value that I could actually put in my progress bar. So I need to watch for that. And also, when I do exceed it, it's time for me to stop the timer, because at that point we have done our task of showing that timer growing through the increments of the tick event. So as I come down, I say, take a look at the load progress, which is going to be some value between 0 and, in this case, 1,000. And if I start to get to it or above 1,000, which is my maximum setting, then I'm going to reset. In case it went above, I'm going to reset it back to the maximum value I have. Otherwise, I would throw an exception if I didn't do that. Then I'm going to stop my timer with the stop method. Then I'm going to change my label to ready. Now, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but let's first of all, let me comment this out. And we're going to just run this. Now, I've set the load progress. We've checked with the if statement to see if I've exceeded the time. And if I have not, then I'm going to take that value and assign it to the value of the progress bar. So let's see this work first as we run this program. So I'm going to set the screen so you can see it better. We'll hit start and compile and run it. And there's our screen. There's the progress bar coming across, and it's going to end here in a second. And there it's ready, and we're done with this. Now what we'd like to do is transfer control from this screen to the main form, and that's what I'm going to show you next. Okay, so let's go back to our code, and that's what I commented out. I'm going to activate this code, and you'll see what I did was I said dimension or declare main form as a new main form, and then I said main form show. That brings up that form that I want to have as my normal program. Now I'm saying ME close, which means this form, the splash screen form, close out at this point. And so I, at this point, have transferred the information over to, or I transferred the form that's showing to the main form. Now let's take a look at the main form real quick, and I'll let you see that. Main form is just like the splash screen. I've got only one label here. There's nothing else. The code behind it is just the bare bones skeleton of this. So there's nothing here other than to show that we're now in the main form. Now let's come back, and what I'm going to do is come back to the code for the splash screen and remind you that here's ME close. Now what would happen normally without changing some settings is that when I close this form out, the program would end. And I'll show you that real quickly because it'll just die out real quickly. I'm going to let it run. It'll go for 5 seconds loading the form, and then it's going to end. No, it doesn't, because I've already done the change. I'm sorry. I've already shown you the results. But what I did was I came over, and I'll show you here, to the project itself. I clicked on the project, double-clicked on that to see it, and there is an application tab to the project. And I'd like to show you that what I had done was, first of all, I set the startup form to the splash screen, and then I came down and set the shutdown mode. Now normally the shutdown mode is when the startup form closes. So if I had left it as default, the ending with the ME close on the splash screen would cause the program to end. So I have to change it to when the last form closes on that. And so the two key things are the startup form now is my splash screen form, and my shutdown mode is when the last form closes. We'll come back to this in a minute because I want to explain some other things to you about the splash screen. But those two settings then allows me to transfer to the main form and close down the splash screen. Let's see it run again so you can catch what's going on. There's my form coming in. It's running, it's loading, not really, but it's progressing forward, and then it transfers to the main form. Now when I click on the X of the main form, the program will end. And there it does, because that was the only form left to show. So remember, the important thing here is if you do the splash screen and create an artificial splash screen form and then want to transfer control, you've got to do some settings to the actual project from its defaults. First of all, you're going to start up with your splash screen form, and then you're going to do the shutdown mode when the last form closes. Now let's talk about the right way to do things. If I go back to our code, I've got a little bit of information in our code that I'd like you to see. At the very top, and you'll go out to paste bin, and you'll see all this information. And also you'll see the information about how I set those things in the properties. But I also wanted to direct your attention to the My Application minimum splash screen display time. We can actually set that value to always show the splash screen for a certain amount of time, maybe 3 or 5 seconds or whatever. The system normally shows the splash screen as long as it needs to show it until it's ready to display the program. So we normally want to do things properly and let the system do it. But if we wanted to artificially set the splash screen because we want people to really appreciate the fact that they're seeing your program, we can go out there and change that setting. Now, what we would do differently is our main form would be coded as the main form that we're going to. In fact, I'm going to do a little switch here. We'll actually change this to make the main form the startup, and we'll let the splash screen be our artificial display. And I'm not quite certain how this will be because normally you don't do the progress bar in the splash screen. So let's do this. And I think you'll see that there is very little need for a splash screen because it's run so efficiently on the load. So let me come back to the project. I'm going to set it to the startup form of main form. And what I'm going to do is change the splash screen to its real value. And here we can set that. Now we can go to the view application events. And here's where I can actually code in. It talks about the area where I can code in. And the site that I have listed for you will show you how to code in this area if you really want to do a splash screen. Otherwise, this will do everything automatic for you. Okay, I cancel. Let me just go ahead and save that as is. Now let's run this, and you'll see that it may not even show our splash screen hardly at all because it'll so quickly load in place. So let's reset it, do a run, and boom, that will go, and then it goes to main form. It didn't even have time to finish out because it didn't need that much time. So if you truly code the splash screen so that it does things the way it should, instead of doing an artificial splash screen, it goes very quickly. When we do that once more, it's going to go very fast because we haven't changed the override, and it went right in. So normally I recommend that you code taking advantage of the system determining when to go from splash screen to main form and not try to code in that progress bar. But if you do want to have that progress bar for some reason, remember in the project area, what we have to do is set our startup to the splash screen form that we've created. I'm going to go over here to this one. I'm going to change the splash screen down here to none, which then will allow me to change the startup form to the splash screen. And I'm going to make certain when last form closes, the program ends. So with that change, this will be our mock artificial way to do a splash screen. So let's do it one more time. There it goes. Our 5-second load with the progress bar moving across, loading, and then our main form. So I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about the progress bar. Progress bar is very easy to do. Normally we have a value from 0 to 100. Now I changed the maximum, in this case up to 1,000, to give me a little room for some math that I needed to do. But then you want to show the progress bar in terms of a percentage. So remember, you're doing things in terms of a percentage to allow that to grow through the time that you're displaying that. And the progress bar's value is a property that is of an integer type that we're going to put in a value between the minimum and maximum. And as we do that, it'll grow to show what we want to see in that progress bar. Now the timer has basically 3 properties we want to do with the timer. We want to not only declare it and instantiate it with the new keyword, but we also want to set the area or how much time, the interval of the timer to some value. Remember, the default is in milliseconds, so that if you want 5 seconds, you've got to multiply 5 seconds by 1,000 to get that to to space out for every 5 seconds something happens. And then you use the tick event to do things. And you fire off everything by the timer start method and the timer stop method. So those give you the key parts to learn about the progress bar, the timer, and then how we modified a artificial splash screen to load for 5 seconds. So take a look at the code that I have out there at Pastebin. Once again, the information's out at Pastebin. Take a look at it, see how it's done, and rewatch the video if you'd like. Try it out. It's a very simple one. You're only working with 3 controls to learn how to do it. And it'll give you confidence to work with the progress bar, with the timer, and learning how to configure your whole application to have a splash screen. So until next time, get your hands dirty in code and get out there and do some coding. Take care.